Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Tom, pronouns they, them. I'm from Northern California and I'm here to talk about why inquiry circles uh, are important and why we should do them. And so the three things I'm going to talk about is proving that um, inquiry circles as a focus instead of going to just meetings results in recovery success. Uh, Proving that working as a group has tremendous benefits over working with a one-to-one mentor and working as co-mentors. And three, I'm going to describe what some of the results that I've experienced doing inquiry circles with. And I've done over a dozen. Um, I lost count. So, all right. Uh, I, uh, okay. I read a study. I was always fascinated with this country. There's a study where one out of every three meetings of this fellowship happens in this country. And I thought it would have been the United States, but the fellowship is Narcotic Anonymous and the the location is in Iran. So what are they doing in Iran uh, that's different? And they'd only started like 30 years ago, whereas, NA was founded in the United States. Um, so I think within 15 years, like there was just like this boom, and then finally they sent some people to from the World Services to go check it out. And when they sent the people for World Services to check it out, they were being treated like superstars or like almost like people life-saving figures, like, and everyone wanted to mob them and lovingly and just like say thank you for this. Like it wasn't that they were revering the individual, but they were revering the the program and the carrying on the message. um so yeah, NA World Convention in Iran, convention in Iran last had 32,000 people participating, whereas the World Convention for the entire rest of the world consisted lately of only 24,000. So they're definitely doing something incredible. Um, uh, their 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 um, their social aspect is like such that like the government like they tried to incarcerate people uh, that were opiate addicts, but it just filled up the jails. Apparently, there's about 2 million opiate addicts. They're like basically next door to uh, Afghanistan and Pakistan, where basically there's like huge blooms of poppies, and so they have the most capita per um, uh, they have the most opiate addicts per capita, and so they've got this huge endemic. Um, I think a good way to just kind of like put it out there is that opium in Iran costs cheaper than beer in the United States. For example, you can get 3 grams of opium for $1. So you can imagine how crazy that is. Um, okay, so what's going on? People don't know. Things are going crazy. They're going like crazy. And finally, they started uh, doing NA studies there because it was so successful. And now there's more NA scientific research studies in Iran than anywhere in the rest of the world, including the United States and the United Kingdom. Um, and in the same year that 2019, that Recovery Dharma was founded, they released a research study that was incredible that said, here are the key factors that we believe that the science points to that says this is what grew the fellowship. Um, and so we are lucky to have this information, even though it's not, one-to-one. It's not, we're not a 12-step, but this is about recovery and saving lives. So before I talk about the study, I'm just going to start using RD lingo. So if there's a step work, I'll talk about RD inquiries. If there's like a mentee and NA, I'll say, I'm sorry, sponsor and NA, I'll talk about mentors and mentees in RD, and so forth. So the major thing that they found that kind of like directs everything was that instead of focusing on clean time, which is what they do in the United States, instead of focusing on proud time, they focused on finishing their first round of inquiries. And when they finished their first round of inquiries, they would throw these massive celebrations, like mega stadium celebrations, that would restore them to society. There'd be hundreds of mentees that like go up and like, collect their, move forward in their recovery. But I think one of the most powerful things about that kind of idea is that when instead of just like staying clean or not acting out on my process addiction, instead of just focusing on that and riding along, now I'm like actively looking at the stuff in my past that got me to act out, that's underlying, that I'm not thinking about, that's invisible, the trauma, the pain, and I'm forcing myself to become to look at it and be get through my recovery and master like these principles. And for us, it would be loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, appreciative joy, and generosity, service, and forgiveness. And so when they focused on that, they ended up with tons and tons of basically people that were like good enough to be mentors now, because they had started out just like us. They were in short supply of mentors. They didn't have anyone that completed their inquiry work, and they needed a way of getting inquiries done. So in this study, one thing that they also pointed out is that every week they didn't just go to their meetings, they would do at least one or more inquiry circles as well. So instead of just staying clean, not acting out, they were doing some really hard inner work week to week with the same people constantly. And part of that same peopleness being so important is automatically when I see the same people, I have an automatic support group. I don't have to go looking for new people to hang out with. I automatically have a group of people that I can reach out to. It's not just one mentor that they might or might not be available. But one of the most powerful things that I found was just that when we have like a one-to-one thing, it's a bottleneck, and we're not going to get very far if we have only so many mentors. I think it's like 5 minutes time left. Okay. But if we have a 1 to 5 kind of effect, like a flowering, and let's just say maybe only two of those people go on to start new inquiry circles, you can see this blooming effect of every inquiry circle making a difference. And like I did some calculations, and if only two of those people launch new inquiry circles, then in 5 years, your inquiry circle will have produced about 1,000 people that completed inquiries in 6 months each. And so that's the power of your inquiry circle. And y'all achieve recovery. It's like, that's the real measure of recovery. Counting days isn't the real measure of recovery, especially for process addictions. When there's infinite process addictions and only so many substance addictions, counting days no longer makes sense. I gotta eat, and maybe once a month I act out. I eat something I say I'm not going to eat, or eat outside of my hours, and then I say, crap, I broke my sobriety, and then I start over another month, and then every month I'm shaming myself. Oh, everyone else is doing great, but I'm shaming myself every month. And so like I feel like a failure. And what I'm doing is I'm counting the number of days since I failed. And this is the value that I have? No, because I used to act out 365 days a year. So acting out 12 days a year is a monumental success, in my opinion. And that's just for my recovery. So I think that's a big difference. Measuring our success not by days since I fucked up, but how much work I actually put into it. The ways that I've done inquiry circles, we've basically been co-mentors to each other. This kind of solves the problem of when at the end of the meeting everyone says like, who needs a mentor, and everybody raises their hand, or someone asks, can someone be a mentor, and no one raises their hands. Like being in an inquiry circle, we kind of all are co-mentors and are accountable to each other. And so that is almost like the perfect solution to this beginning infancy of recovery Dharma, where we don't have many mentors. But even with that, it's like in inquiry circles, there's kind of not a need for someone to have finished the inquiries to take me through that. That's like old traditions, like from 12-step. We can, at some point when this book was written, nobody had ever done all the inquiries, right? So at some point, somebody has to start them. And why not it just be us? And so, in my opinion, no one needs to take us through it. If we take each other through it, we're going to do well, and we're going to do great things for recovery Dharma. But I listed a bunch of reasons why I think that doing it in a inquiry circle, in a group, has huge benefits. So one is the long-term friendship over 6 months, weekly, week to week. People will know when I'm feeling bad and I'm not saying it, or I don't even know it myself, and they'll tell me. There's a diversity of sharing when there's different habit energies of addiction. And so I can learn to relate more. Everyone's more likely to complete the inquiries because there's this momentum that's going with a bunch of people. But even if a member leaves, it doesn't stop the whole process, and you have to start over, kind of like what I did in 12-step. Like if I stopped with my mentor, then I would have to start over again. And that's just, it doesn't make sense to me. Being in an inquiry circle also gives us a really safe, intimate place to be of service on a small scale, especially if we feel kind of anxious and awkward about doing service on in a bigger scale. But I think one of the most important things that I found was that um, if you haven't heard of the 13th step, it's when like somebody basically is uh, an older person preys on a younger person as a I don't know, romantic relationship. And so but it also happens sort of like when therapists and the client is sharing really intimate details of things, it's very natural for there to be like really close feelings of this is intimate, and I'm getting confused with my feelings of, is this emotional intimacy, is this romantic intimacy? And when we do it in a group, we kind of we lower the chances that we get confused by this, because we see it with each other, we see it happen with everybody. um, and so yeah, I found that to be a big deal. Romance is like kind of out of the like question. In fact, like one of the things that I recommend with my groups is using guidelines. And one of the guidelines we put is honoring intimacy boundaries. We do not use the meeting for um, uh, forming romantic relationships. And that just kind of helps. So anyways, yeah, so this is all based on sound science, I believe, and my personal direct experience. Is there anything else? Oh yeah. So I think the celebration part is important. Um, what we've done through COVID is like we would either mail stuff to each other. So uh, my friend Kit mailed me this. No, this one. At the end, it made us all uh, amala beads and mail it to each other, or we would maybe mail a string to each other and just tie it, or um, or watch a movie together that we all loved, or I started to make these things, inquiry circle chips out of wood, and I designed them out of Photoshop, and and it's cool. It's got our names around it in a circle. Yay! And a beautiful lotus in the middle. And I make these for free for everyone. It's on a keychain thing, and in order to get it, I just have people sign a form that says you finished your inquiries, and then I'll send them to one person in your group that redistributes them. And I think that kind of like having this celebration thing where you hold something physical in your hand that represents all the weeks, the laughter, the tears, the hard work that you've put into your recovery, um, it means something. It means a lot. And it, there's that saying that not all heroes wear capes. And when I hold this, I certainly feel like a hero. Anyways, my name is Thomas. I use pronouns they, them. It's been a pleasure sharing this all with you. Sorry I went over time.
Thank you so much, Tom. Such amazing information, the studies and your personal experience and recommendations for inquiry. Really appreciate it. And I know everybody here got a lot out of it. Thank you for sharing. So next up we have Eleanor, and Eleanor is going to talk about how to start your own inquiry circle. So I'll pass it over to Eleanor.
Thank you. Yeah, as has been true in the past, when speaking after Tom, I kind of just change my whole game plan because I get so inspired but what by about what they've said. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. First of all, I want to let you all know that as resources are being dropped into the chat box, which Tom did, I'm copying and pasting them onto one sheet. And then everyone will get access to that. So you don't have to like take a million notes. I'm taking notes for you. Of course, take notes if you want to, but just letting you know, I'm going to have that all available for you, and I'll post that before our break later. Okay. So I am going to give you a step-by-step guide on how to start or be in an inquiry circle. But before I do that, I want to just get a little personal here and talk a bit about my story. I came into recovery Dharma on, I think it was April 24th of 2021. And I came here for recovery from drug and alcohol addiction. And I was counting my days and I got to like the 6 week mark. And then I learned about inquiry and I immediately said, yes, I'm all in. I want to do this. Drugs and alcohol is behind me. I'm moving forward. And I get into an inquiry group and I'm going through the questions and I start to realize that there is so much trauma behind my behaviors and not just drugs and alcohol, but I'm starting to recognize a pattern that there's other things that I'm doing, other ways that I'm causing harm to myself and others that are cyclical in my life, things that I turn to when I'm feeling bad to escape my own pain. It's not just substances. And it really opened my eyes to what my true addiction is, which is fantasy and attention, specifically from males, and like looking for safety in that space. It completely changed the whole course of my recovery, and I'm absolutely dedicated to that path now. It's been messy and liberating all at once. But yeah, just being able to even say that that's my addiction is a huge step for me. So I just wanted to let you know that inquiry can be revealing and challenging and beautiful, all at once. All right. So let's do a little step-by-step guide on how to do inquiry. For anyone who's like a total beginner, that's what I'm starting with here. So let's just say you know nothing about inquiry. You're like, what are we even talking about here? So the first step of doing inquiry is to get a copy of the Recovery Dharma book. If you don't already have one, there's a PDF version. You can order them on Amazon. It's just called Recovery Dharma, and there's a new version of it out. It's the second edition, and the inquiry questions are all grouped together now. Towards the end of the book, it's on page 136. So that's a really good thing to start with, is read our text. Get familiar with the concepts. What are the Four Noble Truths? What is the Eightfold Path? And that will really help guide your inquiry. I also want to let you know that there are other versions of the questions. There have been several iterations of these inquiry questions. I've reworded and reordered the questions. So in the original book questions, we are starting with the first noble truth, which there is suffering. And starting with make a list of all the ways that I've suffered and why is a really intense, in my opinion, way to start inquiry. And I was not comfortable doing it that way. So I made a separate set of questions that starts with taking refuge in the Buddha, the Sangha, the Dharma. And it's just kind of like an easier way to like work your way into the questions, especially if you're in a group of people who you might not know very well. So I created my own slide set that has those questions in it, and you all will have access to that slide set. Let me just take a moment and show you what I'm talking about. Okay. So yeah, like this was our very last meeting that's still listed here. It's at the top right now. We did karma as our final meeting together as a group. So we did a reading on karma. We had a set of inquiry questions on karma. I think these are based on the book questions. And we journaled and shared together. So you, like I said, you will have an access to all of these slides. There are readings and questions for every topic. I think there's like 100 slides in here, no, 60. So that is all there for you. There is another set of questions called the Inner Child set. And that looks like this, Inner Child RD Inquiries. And this contains a lot of similar information. There's like links where you can go to each section of the book and with a reading and those questions. And again, there will be a link to this that's posted in the slides later. Okay, so like I said, first step, get the book, familiarize yourself with the book, and just know that the questions in the book as written are not the only where there's other options. All right, step 2, how do I know that I'm ready to start doing inquiry? There's no specific amount of clean time that's necessary or advised to start inquiry. You can start today. We'd be happy to help you set up an inquiry group today after our workshop. But just as some guidelines, I would say it'd be a good idea to attend a regular recovery Dharma meeting, specifically a book study. It can give you that insight into the type of language that's used in our program. So going to a meeting like weekly or more often would be really useful. It'll get you more comfortable in your community. You'll develop a sense of, I have a home sangha, these are my people, this is where I can get support. And I would also recommend developing a daily meditation practice. So even if you can't make it to a meeting every day, even just sitting for 2 minutes, if you could sit quietly for 2 to 5 minutes every day, take a break, take a breath. Maybe it's like a short walk in nature, and have that time set aside to, you know, have some inward facing attention. So like, what's going on with me right now? I think that would be really useful as a way to know that you're prepared for starting inquiry. Yeah, know that this process of being in an inquiry circle does take dedication. A typical round of inquiry lasts about 6 months, and sometimes these groups stick together for a year or longer. And having that dedication is an important aspect of doing inquiry. So having routines around these habits like reading the book, attending meetings, and meditation will really help support your practice of inquiry as well. All right, the third step of how to be or start an inquiry circle is to cultivate your wise friendships. And this is a question I get a lot as a host, is like, how do I make wise friends? It's was really difficult for me coming into this program as a socially awkward or shy person, and being in this program actually changed that a lot. But I did have to push myself to reach out to others. And what that looked like was I would go to meetings, listen to other people sharing. When someone's share resonated with me, I would send them a private message in the chat and just say, thank you for your share, that meant a lot to me. Or I really know where you're coming from when you said such and such thing. And then maybe the next week say hi again. And it's a slow and organic process of getting to know people. And that's how I ended up getting to know the people who were in my inquiry circle, is through this process of just like slowly saying hi, maybe eventually we have each other's phone numbers, we're texting back and forth, then like, hey, do you want to do inquiry with me? Doesn't have to happen like that. That's just what worked for me. It took a lot of comfort before moving into inquiry. The next step is to literally just choose a day of the week and a time that works for you. And you could try to do this in a group and choose a date and time that works for everybody. That can be difficult, agreeing in a larger group. But for me, I just picked a day and time that worked for me. It was weekly. Some inquiry circles are every other week. I know there's one on the meeting list that only meets once a month. That's workable too. The standard form that you'll find is that it's weekly. So once I chose a date and time for my inquiry circle, I started announcing it. So for me, this was actually private. I told people privately in the chat who I wanted to be in an inquiry circle with. Hey, I'm thinking I'm going to start this inquiry circle. This is the day and time. If you're interested, here's my phone number. But another way that you can do this is by literally making an announcement at the end of the meeting. You might notice that at the end of most Recovery Dharma meetings, there's a time for announcements where the host will say, does anyone have any announcements? And this could be a really great time to say, hey, I'm thinking of starting an inquiry circle. Maybe it's a women's group. Maybe it's focused on eating. Whatever it is, you can announce that intention as well. Send your phone number perhaps out in the chat and say, if anyone's interested in doing this, get a hold of me. And you'll definitely have folks who are interested in joining your group. I can guarantee it. So after making an announcement like that, you can either reach out to the host of that meeting and ask if your meeting could get hosted by that intersangha. So this is kind of a mechanical, tricky part. So in order to have an online inquiry group, you need to have a Zoom host. I have my own personal Zoom account, so I would be happy to host anyone who wants to start an inquiry circle here on my account, as long as it doesn't conflict with the other meetings that I host. I know PDX Intersangha is also going to be offering some time slots later in this meeting to folks who want to start an inquiry circle. So just keep that in mind. You will have to have a Zoom host. That could be me, that could be the Intersangha that you're a part of, or perhaps Portland Intersangha. The next step would be listing your meeting with Recovery Dharma Global. I'm sure you all know that giant lists, like 400 meetings long, and your meeting, getting that listed on there, even if you decide to have a private closed meeting where you're only meeting as a specific group each week, it's really helpful to the members of your group. They know where they can go every week to find that Zoom link. So to get your meeting listed, you're going to go to recoverydharma.org, and register a meeting is something you can click on under start a meeting. And I will have that link also posted in the resources later. How am I on time? I have no clue.
You should be wrapping up pretty soon, but we're a bit flexible, so
Okay.
you have some time.
Thanks. Another couple of things to consider is some basic hosting skills. I'm sure any host of the meeting that you regularly attend can offer maybe like a 10-15 minute block, perhaps after a meeting or before a meeting, to just go over some basic hosting skills, learn how to do screen sharing, things like that. And I promise you it's not very hard. It usually just takes a little bit of practice to try it out before you start hosting, and you'll get the hang of it. There's some other things to consider when starting an inquiry circle are, how long will we share for? How long will the meeting be? Will you journal on the inquiry questions in the meeting, Or will you send an email out every week and then have people journal by themselves and then share in the meeting? There's two different ways of doing it. I've been in groups that did it both ways. So neither way is better. It's just something you need to decide ahead of time. Another really simple way to do inquiry is to just read directly from the book. If this all sounds overwhelming, like what is a slide set? How am I going to host? What is screen sharing? You don't have to do that. If you have the book, you have the questions. And if you have a pen and paper, you can do inquiry. So just know that's a possibility too. You could literally just phone a friend and share over the phone as well. Like you don't have to do this whole process, but it is a really effective way to do inquiry. And in the other direction, you can make this as creative as a process as you want. If there's some specific issues that are coming up for several members of your inquiry circle, you could say, hey, next week, instead of jumping ahead to the third noble truth, we want to go deeper into this thing that we discovered this week. Maybe it's forgiveness, whatever it is. And you could write a new set of questions for the following week. Know that there isn't a rigid way of doing this, or there's not a specific right way, and it's going to be what happens naturally with the group that you're in. And finally, the last step, showing up. This is so important. Showing your dedication, being present. Some weeks are not going to be great weeks. That was definitely true for me. I didn't feel like showing up, but I kind of had to because I was hosting. So I did. And with the support of the group, my whole perspective changed. And I'm not going to say that always works every time. And there are plenty of circumstances where you can't always make it to a meeting, and that's going to be respected by your peers as well. But like I said earlier, really being dedicated to the process is what's going to make it work. Oh yeah, one more thing. So this is some wonderful information I got from David. In your first meeting, a really great question to ask the group is, what do we want the culture of this meeting to be? How do we want this to feel when we arrive? Do we want to meditate together? Does anyone have any access needs? So access needs are things like maybe someone needs to have a dog with them to feel safe. Maybe someone is uncomfortable with other people eating on screen. Maybe if someone's like moving around, that could be really confusing and jarring for another person. So asking in your first meeting for everybody's access needs is really important to make it feel like a safe space for everybody. Like, what agreements do we have as a group? Do we agree that we all should be on camera because that creates a safer environment? Or is that not necessary? Things like that can be really useful to ask ahead of time. And remember that when you're first starting in an inquiry circle, it can be awkward. We're just getting to know each other, and these first weeks together might just feel a little bit uncomfortable, and that's perfectly normal and okay. Over time, the vulnerability has its own effect in opening us up. And I know trust the process is a really cliche thing to say, but I do think that is my message here. So I think that covers everything I wanted to let you know about the how-tos, and there will be a Q&A later, so please do write your questions down for later so you don't forget, and I'll be available to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor, for sharing all of your experience and all of your wisdom and expertise. It's obviously you have showed up a lot of times and it really shows. So I'm really grateful to hear your talk, and thanks everybody for being here and listening to Eleanor. So, why don't we take a couple minute break? That was a lot, I think, for us to listen to. So, I'm going to say let's come back in just 1 minute so we can kind of digest this. What's coming up next is going to be the panel. We're going to have a number of speakers talk about their experience on being in an inquiry circle. So let's just take a minute and integrate what we just heard, and I'll call you back in about a minute. All right, let's start getting ready to go into this panel. I'm calling you all back. um, so, is there anybody that would like to volunteer to be first on the panel? Or
I will do whatever.
okay, Shelby, let's just go with the order that's in the itinerary. So it'll be Shelby, then me, then Scott, then Ted, then Michael. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone's perspectives and for everybody to hear what it's like being in an inquiry circle. I know that a lot of people here probably have never been in one before, or you're curious what it would be like. We got a bit of a taste from Tom and from Eleanor, and this is some more perspectives around what it's actually like being in an inquiry circle. And I'll pass it over to Shelby to kick us off. And I'll just leave it to you to time yourself and pass it back to me when you're done.
Okay, thank you. Let me just get my little clock. So I will put on the 5 minute. Maybe I'll give myself, since you said we have an expanded amount, maybe I'll give myself up to 7.
That sounds great.
Okay, so thank you everyone for being here. I am so appreciative. And thank you, Tom. And thank you, Eleanor. I learned an incredible amount about inquiry circles from both of you individually and also in the meeting today. It just adds to everything that I have minimally experienced in my few short inquiries. And I'm just going to share some screens here a little bit. So I was asked to share on my experience with inquiry circles. I've had several different ones. Just a little bit about me. I've never been to an alternative meeting besides Recovery Dharma. I found Recovery Dharma about 4 years ago when it was in its inception, and fell in love with it. It was saved me. I can honestly say it did save me. I had a very difficult time with drugs and alcohol. I had been through a few major losses very close together in my lifetime, within a few short years. And it sent me swirling into a life of drugs and alcohol. I had already been retired. I dabbled in drugs and alcohol prior to these losses happening, but boy, did I swirl into that life after those losses happened to me. And I was online scrolling for something because we had found out already about COVID, although the world wasn't closed yet. And I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew I had to do something because I couldn't wake up every morning and put alcohol in my coffee and then move on for the rest of the day and just keep moving on for the rest of the day. It became the only thing I knew. And then Recovery Dharma appeared. I found it online and I went to one meeting and then another meeting and then a lot of meetings, and finally found with recoverydharma.online. That is my Sangha. Everybody finds their own Sangha. That's my Sangha. And I go to sporadic meetings. I host in the MT&T. That is the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time meeting. And that added an enormous amount to my recovery, was learning how to facilitate and being available to other people. So I am going to move on with a few of my slides. And let's see if I can share. Can people see that? Maybe not. Let's try again.
I can see it.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
you
we can
could?
see it. We can
You
see it.
could. Okay, good. Thank you. Let's try this. Advanced portion of screen. Share screen. Okay, so this is, you heard other people's way of doing it. Everybody finds a different way that suits them. This is how I formed an inquiry. I went through a lot of different ways to try to find wise friends, to try to find whatever I could to get wise friends, because I felt very lonely. I felt like I was the only one going through this. And so I posted at the end of a meeting in chat that I was looking to do an inquiry circle, and I found nobody for quite a while. And it took me a little bit. I got more specific. And what I did was I asked for people interested in the chat during meetings. I became more specific in what type of group I was looking for to form the inquiry circle. So at the time, I said I was retired. I'm a retired woman identified as female, and I was interested in other people who identified as female that were retired. And this provided me with more age specific, because as I was going through inquiry circles, and I already had tried being in one prior to, but it was really difficult for me personally, and this was just my personal experience, to be in my age group, be retired, and trying to specifically relate to somebody who was just coming up, graduating college, and also trying to get in an inquiry circle. It just didn't work for me. So I put myself out there, which is rare for me because I'm not a real people person. And I asked for people in my age group who were retired and had the time I've been in inquiry circles where people think they have the time, but then don't have the time. I also posted in the Facebook groups. We have in recoverydharma.online, we have a group called Word. It's Women of Recovery Dharma. And I posted in that Facebook group, and I asked for people who were looking for an inquiry circle. This is just my last inquiry that I'm still in now. I asked for people that were looking for what I was looking for, and I was very specific. And I got, I waited for a response. First time I didn't get anybody. And so I didn't get disappointed because I had been in inquiry circles before where it just didn't work for me. And so, sorry, that was my dinger here. So what I did was realized it took patience. It's important to find the right people so that you can relate to the people that are in there. Sometimes you don't know till you get in there, but I wanted to at least have a base to start with. And you really, one of the things I found out for myself was I was constantly disappointed. I'd put my name in the chat and nobody would call me. And then I'd put my name in the chat. And then I figured out people put their number in there. Maybe I should call them. And that helped a lot as well in trying to form an inquiry circle, because I found a few people that I related to, and we decided we all related, and we decided to form an inquiry circle together. And as I said, again and again, sometimes it's a waiting game. And then also, as Eleanor said, and also as Tom said, sometimes the inquiry questions are difficult. And so originally we started at the beginning of the book. That was very hard. So we started at the end of the book. Then we started in the middle of the book. And then I went through one entire inquiry. And then at the end, we were like, well, we did it. What do we do now? And so what we did was find another book. After our inquiry circle was done, we found this book. And for some of you who have probably already seen it before, it's Pema Chodron, Comfortable with Uncertainty. And that's the one that the inquiry I just finished. And so what we do now is, now that we're done, every few weeks, we go through this book and we read a passage together, and Pema Chodron has it kind of formulated, so each page is another thought. And for those of you who don't know Pema Chodron is a Buddhist monk, and a really good person for me to listen to and to hear what they have to say. So we take a passage and we get together still after our official inquiry circle was over, and we read it together, and then we talk about it and see how everybody's doing and kind of catch up. And so that's enough for me. I'm going to put my phone number in the chat, and if you'd like to contact me for more of my experience, or if you are thinking about doing an inquiry circle, I would love to either help people out or form a new one. It's always a great experience for me, and my recovery marches on from that point. So thank you all very much, and thank you everybody who's here and for the time that I got today.
Thank you for sharing, Shelby, all of your experience and your perspective. So I'm up next. I'm going to talk about my own personal experience in an inquiry group. And I had a very different experience than Shelby. I actually didn't have much recovery Dharma experience before I came into an inquiry group. The inquiry group was my entry point into recovery Dharma. So I was dealing with a lot of issues with food particularly. I'd been doing some like group counseling and I've been working on issues with food. I had just finished a fast, like a long fast, and I was feeling like a lot of rage and shame towards myself and towards the world. And I was like looking for something to help me through this time. And luckily, my wife, who had been involved in Recovery Dharma, told me about this food group. And I'm like, oh, a food group. That sounds like perfect for me. It was an open group that Michael put together, who you'll be hearing from later. And that was about 2 years ago, 2 years and 3 months. And I realize now, like, the group I joined was kind of an unconventional inquiry group. It was just like a bunch of people that showed up. It was so diverse. And that's the one thing that I wanted to talk about is just the variety of people that I was interrelating with in this group was like elders, people my age, people 10 years older than me, people younger than me, different genders, different sexual orientations, different everything, like experience, perspective. And that was one of the biggest things that helped me was just seeing in that container of all of these people being put together, showing up week after week at the same time, all sharing on the same questions from such a diverse point of view, I got this perspective into my own suffering from everyone's perspective. And just like seeing how each person was suffering in their own way really like shed a light on my own suffering. So for me, the diversity of the group was a big thing. And as I said, I was dealing with a lot going into it. And I noticed that I was like, I'm quite a judgmental person. Like I'm pretty harsh on myself and I'm harsh on other people. And I saw that change in the course of this group, seeing these people, becoming close with them and sharing in vulnerability. I saw my relationship to these people change. Like at first I was like, oh, why is this person saying that? Or whatever, I'm like feeling uptight about it. But like going into this like crucible of vulnerability, I became friends with those people and those people became like my family, which really showed me kind of like the impermanence of prejudice. That's a big thing that I have gained in this process is like being with people that are different than me and like accepting them and myself really. So through the vulnerability piece in inquiry, you know, you get into this small group with these people again and again and sharing, you know, what's true for me, what's true in my life. I started to develop like an acceptance of myself and who I was, how I was, like in my shame and self-loathing and judgmental self, like being able to speak from it and be held by the group was part of the process of me accepting myself. And that only came through this vulnerability that was possible through this container. So I really like felt held by the group, and that was a huge piece for me of inquiry. And through that being held and being vulnerable over and over again, I started to feel compassion for other people, which I had never felt compassion before. I think in my life, like if you asked me, I probably would say, yeah, I felt compassion, but I think I just understood it maybe intellectually. And we had a few questions in my inquiry group about compassion, and I realized how confused I didn't really know what it was. I started feeling it through this process of me becoming the holder, me becoming the person that's holding you in your pain, And that just felt like such a gift to myself to be able to be with someone who's going through this hardship and I can hold them. So then through this compassion, through this love, I had a bit of a epiphany in my recovery of like uh, being like living my life from this love that I started experiencing through this 2 years of doing this group. That's my journey in recovery. That's my path in recovery. When I came into it, I was of the mind that, you know, if I control this, if I only eat this at this time, if I eat this type of food, if I don't drink that, if I don't smoke that, that's sobriety to me. And I had this realization that I had to, maybe this is controversial, I had to like let go of my rules and like live in my values from my love. And through inquiry, I had this realization, and I'm starting to feel like that's happening. So being able to speak to you all and like share this is a big breakthrough for me. Like would never have been able to do this before Recovery Dharma. I would have been like way too nervous and too shameful and everything. So thank you for listening and being a part of my recovery, and really grateful to be able to share with you all. And I hope you try inquiry. It's really cool. I will pass the mic to Scott, who is up next. Scott, are you ready to share?
I am.
Awesome.
Okay. I'm Scott, and I have led one inquiry circle group, but my style is to go deep, and it took us 2.5+ years to get through all the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So the way I started that was I had a few years of recovery in Codependence Anonymous, and was also doing refuge recovery at the same time. And I joined Recovery Dharma maybe about 6 to 9 months after it had formed. And so, you know, there was this new book, and I'd already done some inquiry questions in refuge recovery, and I thought I knew Buddhism really well, right? I got this dialed. And it was about 3 years ago, there was a meeting like this. And some people in my Recovery Dharma meeting said, we really want to do an inquiry circle. And they were like looking at me to be the leader. And so I took that on. I thought, this is a good thing. And there's some codependent traits that were there going, I'm going to go in and save the day, right? I'm going to like be such yeah. And I caught myself there, and I go, no, I have to do this for me. I have to do this because it's my growth that I'm interested in. And wow, it did. And other people benefited too, you know, in our group. And it was a really strong group. We still meet, although we just kind of check in. But what I learned was, you know, like Eleanor, I knew that I looked at the first questions, like starting off with suffering, and wow, that was dark and deep. And so what we did is I decided we'd start on wise understanding first. And then we went into the first noble truth, and boy, it was still dark and deep, especially with the questions that I rewrote. So learned a lot of things there, and that is that there really are no perfect questions. You know, I would look at these questions and go, that's not really a great question. So I would rewrite it and present that to the group. And what I discovered in my own writing is that I can't create a perfect question either. And the questions in our book are not perfect. But what is perfect is the Dharma. The Dharma is what brings healing, not the questions. And that was the big lesson that I learned. And the questions are really just pointers to look within and find the Dharma within, and to align our lives with Dharma, and to find recovery in Dharma. And so the really cool thing about this book compared to Refuge Recovery was that the questions were about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, each path separately, which was really great. But there were some questions in here that were triggering to our group, and especially in the wise intention questions about making amends. And a lot of people in our group had done 12-step and it was triggering for them. It felt too much like 4-step and beating yourself up, using, weaponizing the 12 steps against yourself. It felt too similar to that. So we just decided as a group, we're just going to set this amends thing aside. And I thought to myself, as I was leading this group, it was leading me to read some of the Buddhist sutras, to like actually study Buddhism. Like, what is this really? Because the book is Buddhism light. It's pretty, it starts the surface, but leading this group really helped me to be motivated to understand what kind of questions there should be. I don't remember the Buddha ever. I didn't run across any quotes about making amends or even about forgiveness. And in my own recovery, what I realized was that the Brahma Viharas are what did that for me. That instead of focusing on amends and forgiveness and all that, if I just worked the Brahma Viharas of loving kindness and compassion and appreciative joy and equanimity, especially with codependency, that once I worked my trauma and my need for recovery with the Brahma Viharas, that forgiveness was accomplished. It was done without even having to think about forgiveness, and then making amends was just so much easier. So instead of focusing on amends as the process, we focused on the Brahma Viharas, and we wrote some more questions, and what I discovered is making new questions from the group itself is a really powerful tool in and of itself. When I would make a new question, it really forced me to really delve into what the first noble truth was about, or the third noble truth, or wise understanding. And so that was a really great thing for people to have an opportunity to create their own questions, because that really helped customize the Dharma to what we're dealing with. It also taught me how to look skeptically at the questions. It's like there was some question I go like, what does this have to do with the first noble truth? And to really look at it and look at it skeptically, and to find out the person who wrote that question, they wrote it with the first noble truth in mind, but I'm not catching it. And so kind of like really looking at it skeptically and with question helped me find where that person was at who wrote that question and discover the Dharma. So skepticism is a good thing. And, really asking the question, how is this part of it? I was just looking through our new book. I finally got a copy, and they've added some questions in here, which are really great. One is about experiencing trauma from discrimination, and what are ways we can experience healing and practice self-care, and considering opportunities for social justice and how that works with our own recovery. And when I read that, it was like, wow, that is a great question, but so big. And I thought, well, how does this have to do with the first noble truth? Why is it in the first noble truth? Because it really kind of covers all of the noble truths and all of the Eightfold Path. It is so huge in dealing with our trauma. And I could see how someone who's maybe not that familiar with the Dharma might pick out some of these words like justice and think of injustice and discrimination and be in victimhood. And the way I would answer this question now is that it's not about what was done to me. The Buddha taught the person who carries on like a victim, the suffering will never cease. So I could see someone not really understanding the Dharma could start writing pages and pages on this question and just get further entrenched in the need for recovery rather than the healing. So, but if you focus back on what the Dharma is, that question becomes powerful and so cool. Focusing on the Dharma. And the last thing I would want to share is get creative. When I was looking at the questions, we were starting wise speech. I was looking at those questions and I thought, these are great questions, but they're going to bring up pithy answers. These grandiose answers about that it's all up here and not from experience. Like something really meaningful to like really look at my own speech and what's going on there. So I did something that a sponsor of mine did with me, which was really cool, and it worked great. I wanted to share it. And I would call it the lying exercise. You know, part of wise speech is making sure that what we say is truthful. So we were meeting every 2 weeks at this point. So for 2 weeks, everybody had an assignment, and that was to really pay attention to our speech and if we were lying. And lying would be like an overt lie, or it could be a white lie, or it could be a lie of omission, something that we could have or should have shared, but we didn't. And so we all journaled these things. I used the notepad on my phone. And so we came up with this list of lies we had made in the last 2 weeks. And the exercise was then to really look closely of what our intention was behind the lie. And what happened when we were sharing it was like such an amazing exercise, because what our speech, really paying attention to it, what it revealed to us was our core issue. Our core issue. And we got to know each other really well on that meeting, and got to know ourselves really well. And that kind of helped inform the rest of our time together, looking deep. There's a reason that the Buddha put this wise speech before wise action, because wise speech tells us a lot about ourselves. And because we had done that exercise, then when we went to answer the questions, they were meaningful answers based on same questions, but from a deeper place. So go with your gut, focus on the Dharma, and just do it, because it's so helpful and exciting. So thanks for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you, Scott, for sharing your wisdom and expertise. We really appreciate it. All right, where are we now? We're a bit over time, but I think let's power through and let's get to Ted next, and then Michael, and then we'll be taking a short break. And after the break, we'll be doing some journaling. So we'll carry on with the panel, 2 more panelists, and then we'll be taking a short break. So I will invite Ted to come on and to share with us. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone. This is Ted. Let me get some waves out there. Yay. Hi, everybody. There we go. We got to do a thing where you could actually do the wave on here. That would be good. My name's Ted. I'm down in San Diego. I use pronouns he and him. And virtually in Flagstaff, Arizona, but my heart's here with you today. And I'm really glad that we're all here and talking about inquiry. It's been really meaningful for me. And one of the things that I was going to talk about is around feeling safe and secure. And that is having, what does it look like to have that? Because it's really important for us all to feel comfortable in our space in this kind of a situation where we're sharing real intimate stuff, you know, and thoughts. And and feelings and really, really digging deep. So to have meaningful and productive inquiry group, I figured it could be most beneficial to have a sense of security and connectedness within members. So that allows for greatest growth and vulnerability. So once members have agreed upon a regular date and time, consistent attendance by all members, especially in the opening weeks, as people have mentioned, is real vital. Just people just showing up. That's a big part of it. Regarding materials, I think for me, it's been really good to clarify within your group how you'll be generating your questions and if you'll be exploring general recovery concepts or ones that are more specific to a behavior or addiction that might be associated with an affinity group, like eating, like gambling, like lust, this kind of a thing. At your first meeting, it might be helpful to build connections by way of people introducing themselves and giving their bio, doing kind of a short testimonial from each participant. If there are no known leaders that have emerged to steer the group, a lot of times there already are. If there aren't, it can be helpful to take turns as a rotating leader each week, with each member participating. And that might look like someone running the meeting that week, maybe doing the meditation, having generated the questions, that kind of a thing. From the beginning, we can recognize that we're embarking on certainly something very special, and it can be challenging for some to share and receive stories and details regarding recovery that might be excluded in an average meeting, right? So it's therefore not only going to be helpful to be guided by the Eightfold Path, such as use of wise speech and intention, but to clarify, to have the conversation, as was talked about earlier about culture. Something to be clarified might be whether or not the group will be invited to allow feedback, for example, to one another in response to sharing, and what that might look like. So setting intentions, having a clear script to follow each week, I think allows for wise boundaries that can really lessen anxieties around considering just speaking at a deeper level, openly and honestly. In a recent inquiry circle I was involved in, our group sought to set a thoughtful tone by sharing a handout titled Core Guidelines. And that looks like this. So this can serve as a default setting almost and guide the group wisely through some concepts, some basic concepts of sharing, feedback, compassion, and other key concepts that allow for thoughtful interactions. So starting with an assumption for goodwill, this can allow folks to remember to not take personally what others say and do. This also allows us to cultivate goodwill and compassion. So we are benevolent with our time and our energy by sitting and sometimes hearing things that do bring us discomfort. We're sharing vulnerably, yet thoughtfully, remembering that each person in our group is a peer, and also is a peer and not a clinician. That brings up a whole nother thing, but it's something worth noting. So while we're able to share deeply and intimately, having some potential restraint or even asking for clarity around or permission regarding profound details that may include trauma can be wise. And as we do honor and practice with impermanence, and things are constantly changing, we can allow for further consideration and change as needed. moving forward. And that's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Ted. Great stuff. Okay, we have now, to conclude this panel section, a share from Michael. So, Michael, you're ready to go.
Sure. Excuse me. Anyway, let's see. Am I showing on the speaker screen or anyway? Okay, good. I'm still seeing you, so and interesting. Anyway, so just a little bit about me. I let go of drugs and alcohol and nicotine by 1978, so quite a while ago. Then discovered my core addiction to be a food addiction, and became a part of Overeaters Anonymous for a lot of years. And then about 12, 13 years ago, there were a number of us here in Portland that began a kind of a combination 12-step Buddhist group. Those of us that were Buddhist, but also connected to 12 steps, and we would go for 12 weeks. How do you do the first step as a Buddhist, second step, and so forth? Or how would you do the first noble truth, the second noble truth, the parts of the Eightfold Path? We do that for 12 weeks as someone in recovery. And we went to a number of workshops by Kevin Griffin, who still has a group called 12-Step Recovery. A great guy. Wrote a book called One Breath at a Time that really got to a lot of us at that point. So then those of us that when Refuge Recovery came along about 7 or 8 years, probably about 8 years ago, most of us that were, or all of us that were in that group basically became Refuge Recovery here in Portland. And we actually developed more meetings here than in LA, where Refuge Recovery started. And then about 4 years ago, when that kind of fell apart, about 90% of us that had been internationally in Refuge Recovery became Recovery Dharma. And so how I got started in inquiry was about 3 years ago, about 3 years ago. We started with an open group and and basically had it on the PDX website, and a number of people came and so forth. And this was basically to be an inquiry circle on eating disorder or on eating addiction. But what we found was that people came and went, and so there was not really any way to really develop the kind of vulnerability and security and intimacy that some of the other people have talked about. And so what we found is we had to close that group. So we basically let people know that we're going to be closing this group in 3 weeks, and please let us know if you can commit to coming here on a regular basis. And so that did close. We started out with about 13 people. It went down to about 8. And part of the reason that we ended up starting this was at that point, especially coming out of Refuge Recovery, the whole idea of mentorship and teacher-led and things like that were really kind of, even mentorship was in some ways not suggested as much as it was in Refuge Recovery. And at that point, I was mentoring a number of people, and there just were not enough mentors. And somebody basically asked me to mentor a guy in eating disorders, and I was not able to do it. So we decided to start that group, and so it carried on from there. So again, I think, having a good small group of people with a closed group is very important, I think, for intimacy. That doesn't mean an open group might not be helpful to get people interested in inquiry, but at the same time, for us, we found it was really important. The numbers of that group have increased and decreased. And usually what happens is when it gets down to 3 or 4 people, we invite new people in. And usually the process we do that with is to people in the group mention who people are. And we kind of say, I think they might be a fit for this group, and we welcome them. And they try it out. And usually that's what happens. But again, that commitment to regular attendance and really increases that level of inquiry. So one of the things that I would say is, and I think 4 to 8 people is really a good number for an inquiry circle. I think I have shared more deeply in that circle than I ever have with a sponsor, and have experienced probably the most growth and depth of understanding in my recovery in years. I feel that it just took a big step up when I got involved in that, with a lot of leaps forward. So what I'd like to do now is read an excerpt from Thich Nhat Hanh's book called Savor, which is about working with problems with eating and weight and that kind of thing. And it's Thich Nhat Hanh and Dr. Lillian Chung, who is a nutritionist. And what he says is, there is a Zen story about a man and a horse. The horse is galloping quickly, and it appears that the rider is urgently heading somewhere important. A bystander along the road calls out, "Where are you going?" And the rider replies, "I don't know, ask the horse." Okay. And so he talks a lot about the horse being our habit energies. And I know Tom mentioned habit energies before. So in our inquiry circles, basically what we are trying to do is one of our basic practices listed in the RD book is inquiry. And what we are doing is asking the horse. And in a circle, we begin to actually really begin to take a closer look at that horse. And as Thich Nhat Hanh talks again in this book, we begin to hold this deep habit energy, emotion, whatever, and embracing it with the energy of mindfulness, as opposed to pushing it away, because it'll come up like a whack-a-mole later on. But basically what he's talking about with embracing things with mindfulness, looking closely at it, is, and the analogy he uses, it's like a mother holding a crying baby. And when you hold the crying baby for a while, finally the baby calms down. Our craving calms down, our anger calms down, our anxiety, whatever. And then we begin to take a look, what's going on here? Do we need a diaper? Do we need a hug? Do we need food? What kind of food do we need? That kind of thing. And so again, in the inquiry circle, what we are doing is this deep looking of what's really going on here with me. And I know that everybody before me has talked a bit about that, is just looking deeper into what's underneath this addiction of mine, this craving of mine, these harmful behaviors that I do, and that kind of thing. And we also take a deeper dive, as Scott was talking about, into Buddhism itself. I know a lot, like, the Recovery Dharma book does have some very, very good introductory kinds of things. But I think as we practice, we need to take a deeper look. That's why that last practice of growth, going into going to retreats and other sanghas, I think are really important. So one of the things that we've done in that group is developed some other questions. I'm going to briefly share this one. This is one I developed about that I call finding refuge. Basically, in some ways, this is for newcomers. Just asking questions. What brought me to Recovery Dharma? Why did I, maybe not go to 12-step, or why am I here? And then beginning to take a look at, what does finding refuge in the Buddha mean? What does finding refuge in the Dharma mean? The truth and the path. I love the way that the book talks about that. Finding refuge in the Sangha, the community of wise friends, and so forth. So those are just some very basic questions that we sometimes ask. But we also did some very specific questions, as Ted messaged about affinity groups, and that Tom did about eating disorders, for instance. So basically, here's a couple that we used in that. How do I define binge eating? What events, thoughts, or feelings often precede binging or overeating behavior? What events, thoughts, or feelings often follow binging or overeating behavior? How does binging affect my Dharma? How can my practice support a healthy relationship with food and eating? So that's one. And let's see. Let me try to do another one here. When I engage in my harmful eating behaviors, what am I really hungry for? What do I really need? And what would better meet this need? So those are some of the kinds of things, again, with very specific questions, for this. So one of the other things that has been really important for me and helped me in my recovery is trying to carry the torch of inquiry circles, and to try to really help others get inquiry circles started. I've done that with a number, especially in eating disorder inquiry circles, and a piece of that has been connecting people with PDX links and so forth. And I know that one person that we have here is Heather, who is the chair of PDX right now, and she'll be around for a while. And I'll also put my name in the chat. You can email me if you need a link, and so forth. And so, but one of the ways that I have found has been one of the best ways to get others interested in inquiry circles is that in your regular meetings, make the last meeting of the month, that's the easy way to remember it, a writing meeting. And so what you do is you go in and you do shorter readings, maybe only a couple, and then have a meditation that is maybe only 10 minutes and stuff like that, and then have 10 minutes of writing. And we'll be doing that a little later after the break as well. And then after that 10 minutes of writing, and pose questions for that writing, and I'll be doing that as well shortly. And then afterwards, people can share on what they wrote, or share whatever they want to. But I have found that this is somewhere a lot of people don't really understand the practice of inquiry. And this is one of the ways to bring that experience to people of asking the horse right in your regular meeting. And what I've found is it not only helps people understand inquiry better and want to start a meeting, but it also helps actually deepen the intimacy in that particular meeting. And more people make that particular meeting a home group. And so it becomes, so the intimacy of the group itself becomes deeper. And at the same time, then you have a lot more regulars that are ready to volunteer to lead and do meditations in the group and so forth. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for your continued and vast service to this community. All right, so that concludes the panel. And before we have a break, I want to pass it over to Eleanor, who is going to make some announcements and post some resources, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. That was amazing. We've been offering these resources for free for 2 years now. This is an annual workshop that we put on as Recovery Dharma Portland. And just want to remind everybody that dana is the Buddhist term for generosity. You've probably heard this read at many meetings. It's one of the foundational principles of Buddhism, dana, generosity. So we here commit to a balanced practice of giving what we can while not overextending ourselves. And currently the PDX Intersangha is collecting to cover the costs of our Zoom account, which we're using right now. The Global Summit, which is going to be in Portland in person next summer. Super excited about that. Book donations for in-person meetings. And we also have to pay rent for our in-person meetings here in Portland. So even though this is offered for free, if you have the ability to donate to Recovery Dharma Portland, we are asking you now to do that. We have a suggested donation of $10. If that's sounding like a lot, $5 would be amazing. And if that's sounding like a lot, even $1 would be really helpful. So as you can see, Michael has posted on the screen how to get to our donation button. And in the chat right now, please, if you could go into the chat. I just posted about dana, and at the bottom there's a tiny URL link that will also get you to that donations page. We really, really appreciate it.